My name is Ella Wellington,
And my name is LaDonna Jacobs.
and we are doing a project on the successes, failures, and consequences of World War I and its lack of diplomacy.
World War I changed the world. It created new nations, destroyed empires, introduced new technologies, brought about the League of Nations, catapulted the United States into world power, and was a catalyst for giving the US and the British women the right to vote. After 5 years of fighting, Germany surrendered and the heads of nations came together to negotiate the Treaty of Versailles. This should have meant peace, but the treaty, referred by Winston Churchill as monstrous, led to the rise of multiple dictators, including the Nazi Party and World War II.
It is June 28, 1964. Just 50 years ago, today, Austria-Hungary's heir to the throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was visiting Serbia with his wife when he was shot and killed by Serbian nationalists. Exactly 1 month later, July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. It all started during the 1870s when a competition began between the European powers, which led Italy, Germany, and Austria-Hungary to form the Triple Alliance. The treaty made France nervous, so in 1907 they formed their own alliance with Britain and Russia called the Triple Entente. What was designed to keep peace created a dangerous system that would ultimately explode into World War I.
After the assassination of the Archduke, all members of the treaties mobilized for war, but no one was prepared for the new type of warfare World War I would bring. As it was the first major war after the Industrial Revolution, there were new inventions and new ways of war, including trench warfare, poisonous gas, the dreadnought ships, and tanks.
My name is Stephen Westman. I fought for Germany in the Great War. My first battle was horrible. I shot and killed a French soldier, and I felt physically ill. Under ordinary circumstances, I would have liked to shake his hand and be the best of friends. But because of this horrible war, I must fight with cruel weapons against a man who I held nothing against personally.
I'm Warrant Officer First Class William Hunter. I know what you mean. I wore the British uniform. The men I fought, only crime was they wore the uniform of another nation, spoke another language. Underneath that, they were just men, with a father and a mother, perhaps even a family. It went against my inner feelings and anything I'd ever been taught.
While our brave soldiers fought for Germany, us girls at home had our own battles. We thought the war would be over by Christmas 1914. Boy, were we wrong. After all the men left for war, we had no one to do their jobs. At the start of the war, hardly any woman worked outside the home. By 1917, nearly 30% of the women worked in the workforce.
That's how it was for us in Britain. We kept up production by allowing our women into the workforce. Not only were we in the factories, we served as uniform as well. Of course, I'm a no class, so I did not work, but I did my part. Darning socks, organizing relief efforts, I reduced household help so they could join the war effort. We rationed flour, sugar, and butter. It was nearly impossible to get a good cake during the war.
Who could even think about cake? During the war, we slept in a cold, muddy trench filled with bugs and rats.
We survived the mustard gas, crawling under our uniforms, but it blistered and burned our skin. Before the war, my buddies and I were what people called low class. We were looked on as filth. We already knew what it meant to go without. We could only dream of cake. We barely even had bread. More than half my class was not even healthy enough to fight in the war. The loss of life hit the upper middle class more than the working class. Everyone I know lost someone dear to them. I no longer had the help I needed to manage my estate. The taxes were atrocious. Our country was never the same after the war. We used to be the biggest empire in the world. The war cost us £3 billion, and nearly 1 million men died. The only good that came was that us women finally got the right to vote.
What are you talking about? You won the war. Nothing good came from the war for Germany. It was a huge failure. After 5 grueling years, we hoped that the Treaty of Versailles would restore peace. It stopped the fighting, but it did not bring peace. At least not for Germany. The Big Four got together and blamed all their problems on us. They made a list of complaints and things they wanted Germany to pay for, and there was no way we could ever recover.
I never realized that our peace and prosperity brought such hardship to your people. My living conditions after the war outweighed before the war. Suddenly, there were jobs everywhere. There was work for me and my class. We were able to improve our living conditions and even raise a family. The English people realized the class system was not working for us. The war opened our eyes to this.
Exactly. Your blind eye brought Germany sheer economic devastation. The war cost us $39 billion. We lost 3 million German citizens, and 15% of our male population was completely wiped out. We didn't have enough men to run our factories, but even if we did, no one would even want to trade with us. We lacked raw materials to create anything, and our machinery was old and useless. On top of that, we were forced to lose Worden.
Get rid of?
Yes, we were forced to get rid of our monarchy and become a republic. Our hatred for the Allies only grew. We looked for anyone to save us. Sadly, this was the perfect recipe for which the Nazi Party was able to form. They gave us a national identity and hope that had been stripped from our people. The Nazi Party was a direct result of the conditions demanded by the Treaty of Versailles.
Talk about change in government. In 1917, we changed our government twice. We had lived under the rule of the Russian Tsars for over 100 years and just could not do it anymore. Our troops were on the verge of mutiny and had fled the front lines. Finally, on March 15, 1917, under fierce pressure, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated and Russia established a new government.
It was hard breaking the rules and running away from our captains and fleeing the lines, but we needed a savior. So when Lenin came along, he promised peace. We simply land in bread and food. We simply let the Bolsheviks take over. Lenin pulled us out of the war by signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany. It was wonderful to have food again. Because of communism, our economy was stable and everyone had a job.
Yes, we had bread and jobs, but Lenin took away our freedom and centralized powers. Lenin's new government allowed a dictator, Joseph Stalin, to come in. Stalin killed nearly 10 million people.
That is exactly why we Americans decided to stay neutral. The war in Europe was not our problem. We wanted to stay out of it. Even after Germany sank the Lusitania, we tried to stay out of it, but when Germany sent the Zimmermann telegram that practically said they planned to attack the U.S. soil, we could not sit idle any longer. We went in there and put an end to the war. We got the right to vote, too. We went into the factories and did an immense job. We showed them how strong and powerful we were, and that we deserved to be treated equal. And after all the years of war and protesting, finally, men had listened to us.
Oui. That is all you Americans talk about, is how you saved us all. You do not have the losses that we had. Your country was not bombed. In France, we lost our roads, our bridges, our railroads, our buildings. We appreciate the help, but you have no idea the devastation and destruction a war on your own land is.
America lost over 100,000 men in that war. It was a high cost, but the truth is, we probably benefited the most of anyone from that war. Suddenly, we were a world power. And Wilson tried to be diplomatic by the Treaty of Versailles. His 14 points were exactly what the world needed. He even proposed the League of Nations.
You didn't even join the League of Nations.
No, we didn't. Congress was still living in the past. They didn't want us to get involved in the world's problems. If the men at Versailles would have focused more on world peace rather than trying to punish Germany, we would have never had the devastation that we and our children had during World War I and we had to face.
We wanted our land. We were a broken country, but it was all Germany's fault. Who should have to pay for all the damage they did?
We didn't even have any representation in the Versailles. I remember reading the details of the treaty in Frankenfurt-Zutingen. I was horrified. We saw Wilson's 14 points and thought we would be treated fairly, but we were treated like dogs. We didn't even start the war. It was Serbia's fault, and they just blamed us for everything. We were stabbed in the back by the November criminals signing that armistice behind our backs.
Italy has had representation, and it did us no good. Orlando was ignored. We lost almost 500,000 men, and yet we gained nothing from the war but debt. Our economy was horrible. We too were looking for a savior, and we thought we found one in Mussolini. Hindsight is 2020. If only our leaders would have been more fair, perhaps my son would have never died in World War II.
We could go on all day, but our time is up. Thank you all for coming and telling your experience from the war. To end our story on a good note, to end the story on a memorable note, 20 million people died in the war. Another 21 million were wounded. Overall, World War I had multiple successes, failures, and consequences. However, the biggest failure of World War I was likely the lack of diplomacy during the negotiations at Versailles. Instead of looking out for the well-being of all nations and striving for peace, they sought revenge.
The men who met at Versailles left the world right, and fighting for the spread of communism, the introduction of the Nazi Party, and the rise of dictators. These consequences would eventually lead to the explosion of World War II. I hope you all have a great night. Let's make sure to never let another world happen again.